This week I'll be reviewing the Tyndale House Greek New Testament Reader's Edition. It comes in a slipcase, as you can see. You're looking at the spine, surrounded by the slipcase. Here's the back of the book. Let's see if I can get it without glare on it so you can read it. Some of the key points are that it has glosses at the bottom of each page for every Greek word that occurs 25 times or less. They say the font is 10 points, and it is Smyth sewn. There's a dictionary in the back. It's more like a glossary. Here's the ISBN. Not sure how well you can read that. There it is. So take it out of the slipcase. A nice, solid, black hardback. It is not a cloth over board, but it is not one of these very slippery, slick looking hardbacks. Here's the original in Tyndale House Greek New Testament, and just for size comparison, I'll show you that the Reader's Edition is thicker, wider, and taller. It is similar in size to the United Bible Society's Reader's Edition. It's not quite as wide, but it is thicker, and it is almost as tall as the UBS 5th edition, Reader's Edition, maybe an 1/8 of an inch shorter. In fact, it is 9 5/16 inches tall, 6 5/16 inches wide, and 1 5/8 of an inch thick. The text is printed in a single column format, and it is 110 millimeters wide in most of the lines, but the first line of each paragraph is pulled out to the left, making that first line 110 millimeters wide. I count about 68 characters per line. Page dimensions are 9 inches tall, that's 228 millimeters, 5.9 inches wide, that's 150 millimeters. Margins at the top of the page, from the top of the line of text to the edge of the page, 21 millimeters. At the bottom of the page it moves around quite a lot. Here it's quite wide, but if we look at the very next page, it's quite narrow, and it's as small as about 10 millimeters wide. The inner margin can be 12 or 15, depending on whether you measure from the gutter to here, or from the gutter to the beginning, say, of that capital lambda. The outer margin is about 23 millimeters wide, so that's just a bit under an inch. The font, when I compare that font to a symbol font, it appears to me to be about 9.5 points, advertised at 10. The line height is 13 points, so as you can see, it's very generous. There's quite a lot of room between these lines. I find that attractive. First numbers are in the text. Here is verse 11 of chapter 5 of Paul's epistle to the Galatians. And here's where verse 12 is. It's easy to distinguish the verse numbers, which are in a large bold character, from these numerals that connect you down to the footnotes down below. Very easy to tell apart. The text is line matched. Let's see if you can just see that. I'll pull to a page here and let you look to see if you can see to the other side. Well, I need to find one with print on it, don't I? So let's look here. And I think you should be able to tell that those lines are matched up, particularly if you look here in the space between paragraphs. I think the ink is quite black in most pages, so it's quite attractive. There are footnotes at the page bottom, as we've mentioned. They come in 2 columns. The font down here is about 7.5 points. There are 2 types of notes. Most of them are for infrequent lemmas, so in infrequent words that do not occur very often. But you also have notes like this one, which are for verbs that take an unusual form in the text, to explain to you what the root form is. The root form you're probably much more familiar with. Paper is 93 micrometers thick. I estimate the paper weight at about 85 GSM. It's a very matte surface, very flat, very little reflectivity to it. It's kind of a mild off-white. It's not quite a baby powder. It's certainly not plain white. There is some show-through. I do not find the show-through in this volume to be significant at all. There is some print non-uniformity. Let me show you pages 21 and 23 side by side. This is about as severe as the print non-uniformity gets. And I think it's pretty clear that page 23 on the right is printed in a darker and more attractive way than page 21 on the left. No book introductions. Book titles are at the center top of the page, as here. There are book contents are provided in the outside corners. So on these two pages, the first verse at the top of the left page is Matthew 9:24. Last verse at the bottom of the right page is 10:14. And we're looking at pages 22 and 23 here. There are no headings here. That's one of the significant differences between the Tyndale House layout and that of the United Bible Society's 5th edition. UBS does have headings. Chapter numbers are in a nice bold font in the outside edges of the pages. All the books begin on a separate page, as you can tell. As we go over towards the middle, after the book of Acts, we'll run into the Catholic epistles, because another distinctive here of the Tyndale House Greek New Testament is the book order. So after Acts, we have James, and then 1st and 2nd Peter. This is 1st John. So 2nd John, as you see, is on its own page, as is 3rd John, as is Jude. Words of Christ, back here in the Gospels, it's all printed in black ink. We don't have to worry about having our retinas burned out with any red ink here. After the book of Revelation, after the Apocalypse, there are two appendices. The first one's entitled Surface Forms to Lemmas. It's in 3 columns, 9 pages long, and the font is 7.5 points. And this is to give you a clue when you see something that looks unfamiliar. Perhaps you've forgotten it, what it is that you're looking for. This will help you look something up in the glossary if you've forgotten it. And after that is the glossary itself. It's 12 pages, 2 columns. I counted 498 entries. The font is about 10.5 points. After that, we have 5 sheets of the paper of the same weight as the paper in the Bible itself. Then we get into some cardstock, and it's just sort of a normal hardback style of binding. The book is Smyth sewn, as we saw a moment ago. There is no gilt on the page edges. There's one black ribbon marker. It's 8 by 310 millimeters. So it's 310 millimeters long. You can see it extends quite well out of the book. There's no concordance, no maps or map index. It has black and yellow head and tail bands. Sewn binding, Smyth sewn we mentioned. We go in the front. After the cardstock, we see the title page, edited by Dirk Youngkind. Associate editor is Peter J. Williams, who doesn't believe in the Septuagint. Reader's textual notes compiled, and they give their people responsible. And this is a Crossway edition. Here is the copyright page. Copyright 2018. Printed in Italy by LEGO, and my copy, as you can see, is the first printing from 2018. After the copyright page, you see the table of contents, There's a preface and an introduction that we'll take a look at, and then the books of the New Testament in this unusual order: the Gospels, Acts, then James, 1st and 2nd Peter, the 3 epistles of John, Jude, and then you go to the Pauline epistles, starting with Romans, and you see Hebrews there, and then the Apocalypse. And after that we see the 2 appendices that we've looked at already. Here's a preface. You can pause that and read if you like. After the preface is an introduction. It tells you that the main body of the text is the Greek New Testament produced at Tyndale House. There are footnotes for infrequent lemmas, which we've looked at. We've seen those. It tells you that they give you the lemma. They give you morphological parsings. Then we have several charts here that explain to you the parsing information that's used, the abbreviations for them. So here we are into abbreviations, several pages of abbreviations. And we finish. They tell you about the glosses at the bottom of the page. So after the information on the glosses, you come to the paragraph on footnotes for confusing verbs, and they explain what these are for. If you see a verb form that you may be unfamiliar with, it will direct you to the familiar form. And they have a paragraph here about the glossary in the back, and about surface forms to lemmas. And you come to the conclusion. After that, you are immediately, no intervening pages, in the Gospel according to Matthew. So now let's take a look at how one actually uses this information, the information in the footnotes at the bottom of the page. So on the second page in Matthew's Gospel, very first footnote is here at dogmatisi. Here's the one. We go down to the bottom of the page, footnote 1, dogmatizo. It's a verb, aorist active infinitive, and it means to disgrace, make an example of. Here's number 2, lathra. You go down to 2 and it tells you it's an adverb and it means secretly. So that's how we use the ones that are annotated with a numeral, indicated with a numeral. The ones that are indicated with a letter are in the other footnotes. They will not give you a gloss for these, but I look at this and maybe I don't remember what this verb is. That's fine now, but maybe I don't remember that. And the verb here is ephane, and it will tell you that that is the third person singular aorist passive indicative form of phino. Let's look for the second one. Gaganin. That's the B. So if I didn't remember, that's a form of a verb of being. Genamai. I would find it at the bottom of the page. Third person singular perfect active indicative form. So all that's fine if I have a numeral or a letter, but suppose I find a word that I should know, but I draw a blank. Now this is entirely possible with me because I look at people that I work with every day and I sometimes can't remember their names. So maybe I don't remember what that participle, what the root verb is, and there's nothing here to help me. What I can do is I can look in the back at the surface forms to lemmas and see if that will trigger my memory. So let's go back to the surface forms to lemmas appendix, and let's look for an eta, gamma, omicron sort of beginning, and there we find it. So that eta, gamma, omicron, upsilon beginning is characteristic of ageomai, and if I still can't remember what that means, I can go back to the glossary, and in the glossary it's explained to me this is a verb that means to lead, think, or consider. Now I have the Tyndale House Greek New Testament up on a stand to take a close look at the font, and I think that this is a very attractive font. I do like the way the characters are shaped, and they're printed darkly, which is a good thing. The line matching is very helpful. I love the spacing between lines because, at least to the way my brain and eyes work together, the wider the column, the more helpful it is to have that space between the lines. The font, although the layout's a bit different in that the columns are wider here in the Reader's Edition, the font appears to be the same font as that in the book on the right, which is the standard Tyndale House Greek New Testament. As far as I can tell, they are identical. The only difference is that the lines break at different points because the columns are different widths. Reader's Edition having a wider column. Now I'm going to bring over the top the UBS5 Greek New Testament, and I think you'll see that the font on the right here is a larger font. I think it's about 10 points, while the font on the left is only about 9.5. You see also a few other differences. The Reader's Edition has quotations, such as here, in an italic, sort of a leaning font, an oblique font. It has references, which the Tyndale House does not have. Another thing that the UBS5 does that Tyndale House doesn't is it indicates parallel passages, and it has headings in the text that Tyndale House does not have. So all of those are nice features that are omitted from the Tyndale House Greek New Testament. And still, I like it very much. I think it's something of a more advanced reader than the UBS5 is. I consider the Tyndale House Greek New Testament a more advanced reader than the UBS5 because of the criteria used in determining which words to give you glosses and parsing information on at the bottom of the page. Tyndale House gives you that information on words that occur 25 times or less. UBS5's criteria is 30 words or less, so it includes more words. And in fact, I looked through Luke 1, where the vocabulary is a bit more difficult, and found that UBS5 has 228 of these glosses in chapter 1 of Luke, whereas Tyndale House has 168, so that's 60 fewer. Now, Tyndale House somewhat makes up for that by giving you this additional information that UBS5 doesn't have about verb forms that might look a bit strange to you, that you might not recognize. And it does that 26 times, so that sort of compensates for it, but not. The Tyndale House has, as we've seen earlier, this very helpful surface forms to Lemmas appendix, and then it has a glossary. But here again, I think the edge goes to the UBS5, which has this complete dictionary instead of a glossary. There are a number of differences between these two editions, and I've tried to summarize them here in this chart, which I will just leave up on the screen for a few seconds so that you can read it or pause it and read it later. The Tyndale House Greek New Testament Reader's Edition does not include the introduction from the original Greek New Testament. This introduction, I think, is something that you really do need to read, and it tells you some of the distinctive characteristics of the approach and the contents of the Tyndale House Greek New Testament. And I've tried to summarize those on this chart. One of the key things to note is that it began as a revision of Samuel P. Tregillis's Greek New Testament. The text is based on ancient manuscripts, it looks like, for most of the volume, except where older manuscripts are lacking in the Apocalypse. They've tried to have at least one of their sources from a 5th century or earlier Greek manuscript. They want to produce a text with a high degree of directly verified antiquity. Their approach involved taking into account scribal tendencies when they made their choices. Spelling is somewhat unique in that they follow that employed in early manuscripts, although because nomina sacra are not employed consistently in their sources, they decided not to use them. And then you've seen the peculiarity of the order of the books. They do that based on the strong tendency in manuscripts to place Catholic epistles immediately after Acts. The order is very similar to that in the Robinson-Pierpont Byzantine text form. And finally, the paragraphs are informed by the manuscripts. So they mark them with ecthesis, and they mark them as well as they can based on the actual manuscript evidence. Now, because of their approach, and because you have a different set of people sitting around the table making editorial decisions, the Tyndale House Greek New Testament differs from the United Bible Societies and Nestle Aland Greek texts in a number of ways. When I did a review of the original Tyndale House Greek New Testament back in July of 2018, I prepared a number of charts that show some differences between the UBS5 and the Tyndale House in readings where the UBS5 considers the message to be certain, that is, that they have high confidence in their choice. And so I found 9 out of 500 what UBS5 calls A readings, where Tyndale House differs. So I'm not going to talk to these charts, I'm just going to show them again. I will point out that the one for Revelation 5:9, which should be coming up on the screen, I changed the translation that appears on the right-hand column based on a recommendation from Dr. Yonkin. And then I've added a couple of other observations to the other observations chart, which comes at the end. Well, this pretty much completes my review of the Tyndale House Greek New Testament Reader's Edition. I'm a big fan of the Greek New Testament that Tyndale House has produced, and I think this Reader's Edition is very worthwhile. It doesn't do some of the things that the United Bible Society's 5th edition does do, but it also gives you additional information that the UBS5 doesn't, such as the information here on unusual looking verb forms. It's very helpful. I like the font, I like the line spacing, I think it's printed very well, and it's a very sturdy, durable hardback, printed on some thick paper with relatively little show through and no gloss or shine to it that you have to worry about the lamp page eye angle. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Tyndale House Greek New Testament Reader's Edition. If you have, I encourage you to like the video and to subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching.